you do in these cases?
Yes, I think it's a big challenge for us because, as you have rightly pointed out, we have that kind of poor reading culture in this country. You provide people with reports, they don't read them. They'll gather dust on their table and they can hardly read the reports or much more manuals or rule books, So as far as we are concerned, we think that we have a responsibility to provide people or to allow people to access these rule books because it's very important. But as you said, we have a challenge that people are not actually interested in these rule books. That's why we, even among the MDAs, ministries, department agencies, sometimes we receive letters, that reveals that these people still do not understand the general orders or the PSC regulations. So we keep on writing back to actually sensitize them, by way of what they should be doing in line with particular provisions of the general orders or public outcomes or regulations. But last year, we also recognized this gap as a capacity gap, and we decided to have some sort of a training session, reorientation of civil servants, mainly administrative cadre. We started with assistant secretary level, which is the lowest level of the administrative cadre. We invited all the assistant secretaries, to PMO conference room, and my directors were very efficient in ensuring that each director was able to take them through aspects that affect his or her job. So, and that basically covers the general orders, PSC regulations. We try to take them through, and we did try to go through all the levels, up to the level of, I think, principal assistant secretaries. We are yet to do for the deputy permanent secretaries and permanent secretaries because we think we have a challenge right up there.
What kind of challenge is that?
That's what I'm saying. If people are supposed to conform to these general orders, as we will always indicate in your appointment letter, you are supposed to conform. By conformity, you should understand. You should be aware of the rules. If you are not aware of rules, that gives us a challenge. For example, I'll give you an example. The PSC regulation 57 says if a duty officer, is absent from work without permission, it sets out what you should do as a head of the department. But for some reasons, because you are not conscious of the rule, regulation, you tend to allow this phenomenon to go on and on, whereby, some form of ghost worker menace is created. Because if you leave your job, maybe you decide to go back way, or you decide you have got an opportunity to travel or whatever. So you, by virtue of your position, you should resign. Because you are leaving the job.
But they don't resign.
You decide not to resign because resignation also, there is a rule. It says you should give 1 month notice or pay 1 month salary of notice. But because you think, you don't want to abide by the rule, you just want to go. We say ceremonious departure, exit from the civil service, you just exit unceremoniously. Now, if you do that, the head of department has a responsibility. The Public Outcomes Regulation 57 outlines what he or she should do. But this is not sometimes forthcoming. And each time PMO conducts staff audit, we find a lot of those kind of problems, that you'll find we are paying wrong people, So that constitutes ghost workers, But we'll tell you later how we try to tackle all these problems.
Of course, we'll come to that. But what you're saying is in fact very interesting, and I got caught in it at the moment. And I think that would in fact form the basis of what we'll be talking about, Director. We're talking about reforms. These are all things that we should in fact look into once looking at the reform in the civil service. We're also looking at the grading system, the pension scheme. Tell us what has been done so far in this. We're talking about the NDP 2018-2021, and this is like a very vital part of the civil service reform undertaking, looking at the pension scheme, but also at the grading system, amongst others.
These two aspects of the reform, critical.
Right.
critical not only for the civil service, but for the country as a whole. Because I'm sure you are aware, civil servants in the Gambia, you know, I think one of the most poorly paid.
Obviously,
Yeah,
looking
across,
at even
across the civil service.
Yeah.
Now, dealing with that, it's not going to be an easy problem to deal with, because it's a legacy issue. It has been around since the establishment of the civil service. But luckily, as part of the reform program, the PMO, you know, decided to tackle it head on, in that we initiated to review the pay. But before reviewing the pay, two components are embedded in it. You have to review the grading structure, which is different. Then, as soon as you are done with reviewing the grading structure, then you come and review the pay scale, so that you will be able to attach pay to the grades that you have already reviewed. Thank God, PMO did a lot of work in that, of course with the assistance of the World Bank and some consultants. But the work is done now. We now have a new grading structure, which we did through a job evaluation process, in which all the jobs in the civil service were, you know, evaluated, so that they will be rightly placed. If a job belongs to grade 10, the job should be in grade 10. So we did that. Once we did that, then we also worked on pay scales, so that, you know, the pay scales would be attached to the grades. Yeah, so that job is done. The report was validated last month during the permanent secretary's retreat, and an important step for implementation was taken during that retreat, which was to establish a task force. The Secretary General, you know, requested the permanent secretary to establish a task force of key stakeholders, you know, to start, you know, working on the implementation issues. For example, costing, you know, implementation timing, phasing, you know, and all the other finer details of implementation. So as we speak now, we have a proposed grading system, we have a proposed pay scale. This task force is working on the finer details of implementing. So as you know, it's important to take care of employees while they are active, but equally it's also very important to take care of employees when they are inactive. So that is where the pension reform comes in. Because it works in two ways. You know, as an employer, you just cannot be seen to only care about your employees whilst they are active and they are working for you. But as soon as, you know, they get to 60, they retire, you don't care.
So let's take it systematically. Let's first of all talk about the grading system, because we discussed this the other time. When it comes to payment, the civil service, the Gambia is like, you know, one of the lowest, looking at even in the sub-region. So there's a lot that needs to be done in that domain. Now that this paper has been submitted, I'm aware that has been done already. What are some of the new changes that we envision in this new document?
Well, first, the fundamental change that everyone is looking for is for the pay to change, for the low pay to change from what we have now.
Has it been a significant change that we're going to see?
Yes. As I said, it's not a simple matter. That is why when we review the grading structure first, like I said, we have to review the grading structure first, so that every job would be graded properly. That was done. Now you have to now look for pay scales, so that you'll be able to implement the grading structure. Now these pay scales, we have options. You know, and in all the options, definitely if any of the options are implemented, civil servants would take home more. Will take home more. So the new pay scales, hopefully this team that is tasked to look at the finer details of implementation will be able to work out everything that is needed to implement the pay scales. But the simple answer is these pay scales are going to be much more.
They're going to be higher this time around. Well, I don't know how the civil service is reacting to that, but I'm pretty sure they're reacting to it in a very positive light. But also, let's look at the pension scheme as well. You mentioned a very crucial part before I let the peers come into this, that when our workers become inactive, we have to also motivate them as well. So in this regard, what are the newest changes we're seeing in terms of looking at the new report that you've developed in this pension scheme?
Yep. Principally, the whole pension arrangement, the systems, in fact, the benefits is going to be enhanced. Okay. Because currently we operate on the 1950 Pensions Act.
Very long,
a very long time, yeah.
And sometimes they don't even receive their pensions.
Exactly.
How are you also looking into that?
Exactly.
Well?
All that is going to change with this new bill that we have developed. In fact, it has gone to first and second reading at the National Assembly. Right now, we are working with the National Assembly, with their select committees, so that their comments and concerns, are addressed before it is enacted. But it's going to be a completely different ball game from the 1950 Pensions Act. Just to give you an example, currently, if a civil servant retires, your calculation is based on your basic salary. Yeah. So all your other earnings,
allowances and all
are not part of the formula for computation. So first thing, this new bill, your gross earning, your gross salary will be the basis for the computation of your benefits. So that is going to automatically translate into higher benefits.
Okay. So before, let's break it down clearly. So what you're saying is, before, when you retire, say your allowances, the travel allowances, all this house rent, they are not factored in your pension allowance.
Exactly.
Now?
Exactly. The only allowance that was pensionable is the long service allowance, which is called the longevity. If in the civil service, if you work for 10 years and you have not been promoted and you stagnate into that grade, you are paid an allowance called longevity. That's the only allowance that is factored in the pension. But all the rest of the allowance, your transport allowance, your house rent allowance, your risk allowance, your whatever allowance that you are earning, it's not factored in the calculation. And that is like you are sending your employees into poverty once they retire. So the permanent secretary will tell you that is why you have a lot of resistance and fear of retirement.
Of course. Still have people who can retire, but they're scared to go and retire.
Exactly. This is the main reason. But this bill is set to address that. But also, as you pointed out earlier, the whole pension arrangement is disadvantages the employees. You said sometimes you retire months before you get your benefits. Some people retire before they get their benefits. God forbid they pass away.
Yeah.
All that is because the system is based on the 1950 Act, which determines the process of processing a pension. For example, the process would start from currently, as per the 1950 Act, the process would start at the PMO, goes to your department. For example, if you work at Ministry of Education, it will go there, they will calculate, then you send it to the Accountant General, the Accountant General will check, then send it to National Audit Office.
It's a long process.
It comes back again, same route again, back to the PMO, and then back to your office again to raise the manual voucher. Then your office, after raising the manual voucher, will send it to the Accountant General for payment. It's a very cumbersome process, but it's the law. You cannot do anything about it unless you change the law. But with this new bill now, pension is administration. It's going to be centralized. We'll have a department under the PMO. It will be like a one-stop, where everything is done.
Okay.
Yes, and the yardstick that we have now, that we have, put on ourselves, is to process the pensions within a month. You retire within a month, then you get your pay. Yeah.
Very well. We'll hold it there and go on a short break. When we come back, we have a lot more to discuss on this. Stay with us. Welcome back to the OGI Hour with me, Fatu Elika Malushi, and today we're discussing the Personnel Management Office, and with me here to discuss on the civil service and ongoing reforms, my guest from the PMO, and I have the Permanent Secretary himself here, Lamin F. Jawara, and the Director of Civil Service Reform, Sheriff Jallo Aswa, from the same office. So we're still discussing ongoing reforms. P.S. Before we went on the break, Sheriff was making very valid points. I'm pretty sure you have some to add on that, especially the challenges you've registered in this process. I do know that, you know, like you always say, resources are scarce. But then again, we need to implement the activities. We need to move forward as a nation, and especially in the country we are in, a developing country. It's always an issue.
Yeah, I think the Civil Service Reform Program 2018-2027 is a 10-year program. But this program was drawn up after making some diagnostic review of what are the problems with the civil service. And the report highlighted a number of issues. One of those issues is poor remuneration and pension. You know, the pension is pay is too low, and also as well as pension is also very low correspondingly. As Mr. Jallo is saying, we have, in order for us to retain, you know, professional, trained and professional civil servants, there is a need as part of the reform to actually look at the pay, you know, because if you don't motivate your civil servants, you know, there is no way you can retain them. You know, so retention is key in ensuring that the civil service delivers. You know, retention, you know, because we have been spending, government has been spending millions of dollars on staff development, training, only for the government to lose these highly qualified, trained people to, let's say, the private sector, or even international organizations. A lot of Gambians have left the shores of
in the international
organizations when government, you know, may have spent millions in training them. So we are losing them because at the end of the day, you need a decent pay, you know, to sustain you as a family. So you also, as Sirif said, we have realized that the pension is too low, and it's also important for, as part of our retention, motivation and retention strategy, to also look at the pension.
Let's talk about the new bill, in fact, and the consultation process. How did you involve all the stakeholders and the different departments? Were they actually very much involved in the whole process?
Yes, it was a bill that the process was very consultative. We had Attorney General's Ministry with us, as well as Accountant General, Ministry of Finance. And when we got the bill, the draft bill, you know, we sent it to validation, in which all these, you know, key ministries and departments were invited for the validation. But the process of formulating it, we had to, though we were supported by the international consultant, but Aegis Chambers, that's Attorney General's Chambers, was involved throughout, Accountant General's Department, likewise Ministry of Finance. So they were all part of it, the review. And it was very consultative, I would say, yeah.
Well, I do hope that now that the report has been finalized, the different departments can also be aware of the specific things in this, meaning you will have to go on maybe a sensitization program, you call it. I'm aware of the fact that one of your work as well at the PMO, it's supposed to be about cutting costs, but at the same time improving efficiency and making sure that if efficient and effective services are delivered for the development of the country. Now that we're talking about increasing pay, increasing, you know, improving the grading system, where do we draw the line in terms of where do we stop and where do we improve our development-oriented goals as well? How do we make sure that these two do not clash?
Yes, I think as per the NDP, PMO is a critical enabler. PMO has been identified as a critical enabler. That's critical. On the critical enabler one, PMO is to bring about an effective public service that is responsive to the scenery. Now, by that, a lot of other outcomes we should, one of the outcomes that can bring about that is the performance management. We are working very hard, apart from the pension, the pay, we have recognized, the reform has recognized that we need to reintroduce performance management. Because this is key in ensuring that civil servants actually deliver, So as part of that aspect, we have actually worked to generate job descriptions. These job descriptions are key in ensuring that people know their terms of reference, and so that when you want to actually appraise them, at the end of the year, you'll be able to at least use that as a yardstick. So that there was some absence of that in the civil service. So we think that you cannot just appraise me if you don't give me a TOR. And that was very important. We also realized that we need to have a performance management policy. In fact, we learned this from Ghana. When we made a study to Ghana, the Public Service Commission had a study to Ghana, and they realized that, in fact, we need a policy. You cannot just go about performance management when you don't have a policy. And since then, we have developed a draft policy. We have drafted a policy, which is we are trying to schedule, because of, thanks to COVID-19, we have not been able to validate it on time, because our time frame is we want to get it the policy ready, so that we have already missed an implementation period. That's we wanted to implement in 2020, but we realized that we need to go back to the drawing board and draft a policy. So now we've got a draft policy which we want to validate, and then move on to the actual implementation of performance management. Probably now we are now looking at 2021, when we will look at the performance management, because the Public Service Commission, the GO says, like, promotion should all be based on merit. But how do you introduce meritocracy in the civil service? Is only by appraising civil servants, and based on the outcome, appraisal outcome, you are able to determine who should be promoted to which position. This is very important. And also, as part of the appraisal, you also identify the training needs of this person. That's why it is very important, because for government to spend money on training, it has to be well guided by the appraisal outcome, that this is the type of training you require, as part of continuous professional development. Otherwise, any training might not be properly directed, and it may end up wastage of resource.
We'll hold it there and just shift to the Director of Civil Service Reform. We're talking about, of course, this new scheme. Do you think this is really sustainable, looking at our current realities, the country?
I think, let me put it the other way. What is not sustainable is allowing this current system, this current low pension system, to continue. Because if you look at its negative consequences, it's just huge. You cannot even quantify it. From attraction to retention to motivation to efficiency, you just cannot leave it like that in the name of cost. But luckily, on the cost side, as PS has rightly said, it's going to be contributory now. So at least there will be some funds, available from the employee towards the pension system. So it's not like government.
How are you going to? How possible is that going to be? Are they in fact aware of this new strategy that you're trying to employ here? This, how do you call it, the retribution or contribution you're talking about right now? Are they in fact aware, and are you really sure that this is in fact going to be sustainable?
The first activity lined up immediately after enactment is sensitization. That's the first activity we've lined up. We've done the proposals, we've done the the plans, everything is in place. What is just we are waiting for now is for the bill to be enacted, to become law, so that we can go out there, and talk to the people. But coming back on the on the sustainability issue, I think it's not there's no fear, because currently government is 100% responsible for pensions.
Okay.
100%. But now government is at least going to share the burden a little bit with us.
Let's look at that a little bit,
Yeah,
because
so
now we're talking about increasing it, but also at another point, you are reducing part of the income as well.
Yes, that's why these two are going in tandem, like the pay and grading review that we talk about.
Yeah.
Would have added giving civil servants a much more better pay, take home, because if you look at all the levels, the new grading structure has actually is attracting more remuneration for civil servants, in some instances even double,
Okay.
So, but the 5%, I'm sure, working on GRTS, your employer is deducting something, as a contribution to social security, so all parastatal, all other public sector institutions are doing that. Their employer 15%, employee 5% is being deducted and paid to social security. So, part of the federated pension scheme or any other pension scheme you might belong. But that means that the reason why civil servants resign, they don't have anything, because it's seen as pension is seen as a privilege, not a right. But now that you are contributing, it is now seen as a right rather than a privilege, because you are now contributing, so that if even you choose to resign, you will still have your contribution, paid to you. You have something. If you are dismissed, you still can access something. The current pension scheme, if you are dismissed, you lose. Even if people will work right through 20, 30 years, they are dismissed, they lose all their benefits. If people will resign after 10 years, they feel that they have another job, they can't retire, because you can only retire at the age of 45. Suppose I'm 44 years old, I've secured another job. I can retire voluntarily, for instance, only option available to me is to resign. Or maybe
only a year to
a year to voluntary retirement. Or maybe ask for maybe a leave of absence. Maybe secondment if that is applicable in my case. But like this only applicable to other public sector institutions or UN agencies. But if I want to go private, for instance, if a Standard Chartered Bank offers me a job, I have to resign.
Okay.
I have to resign. So it doesn't. It's not quite a very good system. So we think that we need to actually review this, which we have done. And at the moment, as he said, it's at the final stage of enactment, because the National Assembly, we have gone very far with them. And we hope that by their next session, we will be able to, the bill will find its way to enactment.
Well, Director, we're looking forward to that. So fair enough, actually, from everything that has been explained. But let's also talk about, since we're running out of time, so far the achievements registered. I'm aware of the fact that there has been a lot of work that you're doing. I mean, this process alone is in fact arduous. And so far, how far have you come in the realization of the NDP in your domain?
Yes, as one of the NDP outcomes is it's about pay, it's about pensions, so we have since been working on the pay and the pension, as we have already highlighted. Other aspect of NDP, because as a critical enabler, we are supposed to make provide or produce a public service that is efficient and responsive to the citizenry. How do you bring about that? So we said we need to work on the pay in order to retain. We think that we need to work on the pension in order to retain. But we think in order to instill discipline in the civil service and also enhance performance and efficiency, professionalism, we need to introduce performance, institutional performance management. Performance management, which we are also working on, which we have highlighted. And the number of...
And that's going to be another policy. My fear is that our peers, we've been drafting a lot of policies, a lot of regulations. But in terms of our people going by these policies and regulation, is where the problem is.
Yes, I think if you look at number of policies we have, like training policy we have, and posting, we talk about posting policies. Yes, implementation, you can expect to have challenges, especially when it is not well, because you need to do some change management there. As we are saying, if you have the new pension act, new pension law, you need to sensitize the people. If you don't properly sensitize the people, you will have challenges of implementation. But we are confident that when we change the rules, people are going to be sensitized and they will go by the new rule, because it's PMO, like centralized department trying to ensure that people go under. In the past, we have an issue of executive interference.
Okay.
And this has made it very difficult for PMO actually to go by the rules.
Now you're working freely.
Now we are working freely. The executive, there is very minimal, or I would say, the executive interference of what we do. Okay. The executive has given us the latitude to actually look at issues, to actually enforce the regulations and the rules, as far as they are concerned. So I think that political commitment is very important to actually give the institution like PMO to actually execute its mandate. Otherwise there was a lot of in the past, as compared to a lot of interference, because when PMO with this new government came, one of the first things they did, they set up a panel or committee that looked into the dismissals, the arbitrary dismissals that hundreds of civil servants cases were reviewed. Some were reinstated, some were reinstated and retired, so that they are paid their benefits. Some were denied their benefit for 10, 20 years. But as a result of this committee, their cases were reviewed and they were paid their benefits. They are paid their benefits. So those are arbitrary dismissals that were not. Now we want to avoid that. We want to observe due process.
Good. But just to sum it up, Director, how are you bracing up for what's ahead? The fact that you have to, of course, enlighten the people, your government, your departments as well, and agencies about this new report that we're in fact talking about. How is that process coming up?
Yeah, like I said earlier, we are ready to go. All that we are waiting for is for the National Assembly to enact the bill so that it becomes law, so that whatever we are going to communicate, it's not based on our whims and caprices. It's actually based on law. Hopefully by the next session of the National Assembly, it will be passed, and then we are good to go. We plan to go to every corner of this country, meet the civil servants, so that they are aware, because there would also be some processes that needs to be undertaken to kickstart the process. For example, there could be registration, pension registration for this new system. You understand? So we need to do all that.
There should be terms. We expect terms and conditions to come with it.
Exactly. So we are ready to go. All that we are waiting for is for the National Assembly, to enact the bill. It becomes law. Then we have now the full legal mandate to communicate whatever we want to communicate with our fellow civil servant. And hopefully we'll be coming back to GRTS,
of course,
for talk shows, specifically on the bill, so that all the aspects, the important aspects, that would be changing from the current system to the new system, so that all those things are made clear to our civil servants.
Interesting. We do hope, we're praying that it reaches the NAMS as soon as possible, and as well they will take the best decision. Theirs is always interesting, but we remain hopeful. But PS, just to sum it up, we've run out of time. I'm pretty sure you want the public to have hope in the civil service once again.
Yes, I think meritocracy is what we are trying to reintroduce. We are aware that Gambia had one of the best civil services in Africa, you know. But over the time, a lot of things went wrong. There was a lot of arbitrary, you know, dismissals, arrests. Due process was not the order of the day. As a result, a lot of our trained personnel, this led to high rate of attrition. You know, Gambia was one of the countries that lost almost 65% of its trained personnel to the outside world. You know, our trained personnel were lost because of the autocratic regime that we have all come out from. So there was no stability. You know, heads of institutions are hired and fired within a short period of time. Before you are appointed, before you even settle down to implement a plan, you know, you are fired. New person comes, before he settles down, he's fired. So there was no proper planning in the civil service. You can find in such an environment, you know, things are always done on ad hoc basis. Nothing is quite planned for a long period of time. So we have graduated. This is where we have come from. And this is where we want to now stabilize as a civil service. We want to ensure that due process is the order of the day, so that when we are able to do that, people will have confidence in the civil service. And we have already seen coming, because now the number of people, even from the private sector, that are trying to come back to the civil service, you know, is huge. You know, to the extent that we are overwhelmed with requests of people in the private sector wanting to come into the public service, civil service. That shows that civil service is becoming more and more attractive. Okay. And by the time we sort out the issue of pay, you know, and pension and discipline, of course, we know we cannot discipline people when their performance are not monitored and evaluated, which we are trying to introduce. You know, so when all these things are there, we can only hope for the best in terms of efficiency, in terms of professionalism, in terms of motivation. You know, all these things will be, of course, guaranteed. You know, so I think the future looks bright for the civil service.
From all that you've said, PS has basically summed it all up, and of course the director here of Civil Service Reform at the PMO, Sheriff and Mr. Jawara, it's been great having you on the OGI Hour, and we definitely look forward to this particular bill. And once it's passed, we'll definitely have those conversations as well here. But this was the OGI Hour. I was your presenter, Fatu Ilika Mulushi. I did say that the PMO, they were our first guests, and in fact, it was necessary to open up the discussion into what we'll be looking at on this program here on GRTS. Follow us next week as we bring you another ministry which is doing efficiently well in the realization of the National Development Plan. Until then, enjoy the rest of our programs. Bye for now. Hello there, my name is Fatu Ilika Mulushi, and in the coming weeks, I will be here to discuss the Gambia's development aspirations and steps being taken to sustain these gains as envisioned in the National Development Plan NDP 2018-2021. I would be joined in turn in the studio by public sector leaders from government ministries, departments and agencies. The aim of the program is to strengthen inclusive citizen engagement for a more accountable governance in the Gambia. Open Governance Initiative, OGI, is a new program on GRTS meant to promote regular communication between duty bearers and citizens. This series will begin by looking at the service charters of all ministries and their respective contributions towards the implementation of the National Development Plan 2018-2021. You can join the discussion by sending in your questions and suggestions on all our social media platforms, on Facebook at GRTS TV, on Instagram and Twitter at GRTS TV Official. This week on the OGI Hour on GRTS, we'll be discussing on the Personnel Management Office, PMO, and the discussions will center around the service charter of the Personnel Management Office and the evolution of the Gambia Civil Service, achievements registered on the NDP and challenges, ongoing reforms to improve efficiency in the civil service. You can join the conversation this week on OGI Hour on GRTS TV. Permanent Secretary, Personnel Management Office, Lamin F. Jawara, will be our guest to discuss these issues and many others. Don't miss it.
Lion of Judah, my trust is in you. Ancient of days,